he's dangerous. He's got dynamite in both fists.
This is a big fight for boxing fans all around the world.
How to exploit Joe's weaknesses and recognise his strengths.
Frank Warren suggested that the winner of this fight will go on.
There's only one war that matters, the Great War, and it's here. Not entirely true, of course, but I couldn't resist paraphrasing Game of Thrones to describe Daniel Dubois against Joe Joyce, which takes place this Saturday night live on BT Sport. It certainly is here, only a few days away now. It's not the only war that matters. We've seen a lot of great fights this year, but it is certainly the biggest all-British fight of 2020. And hugely anticipated fight that I'm hugely, again, looking forward to. The general consensus appears to be that Daniel Dubois wins early, Joe Joyce wins late. But I'm here to tell you that anything could happen, pretty much. You know, Joe Joyce could win early. He's certainly powerful enough. He's got early wins on his record. He might not punch as hard with single shots as Dubois, but he punches in great volume and every shot hurts. They're thudding shots. If Dubois decides to engage and exchange too early, there's nothing to say he won't walk onto a shot that buzzes him and then Joyce follows up to overwhelm Dubois in the early rounds. And on the flip side of that, there's nothing to say that Dubois couldn't win late on. You know, Joe is not the best defensively. He does take a lot of shots in an effort to land his own. And I don't see why Daniel Dubois couldn't take advantage of the gaps in Joe's defence and gradually wear him down. So pretty much anything could happen. I don't necessarily see Dubois winning early, although a lot of people say he has to win within the first 6 rounds, otherwise he's not going to win at all. I don't agree with that. I think Dubois, we've seen him in fights. He doesn't tend to kind of go searching for those early knockouts. They just come because he's a huge puncher and he finds the gaps. And the opposition he's fought so far haven't been always the most durable, Kevin Johnson aside, and he didn't come to win. So Joe Joyce, people talk about his chin from the amateurs. People talk about being hurt by the body shot in his last fight against Bryant Jennings. And yes, he can be caught cold, but I don't see Dubois destroying him early on. I see Joyce able to come through hairy moments, if they come early on, and to take the fight into the mid to late rounds, at least. I'm not sure I see an early knockout on either side. I see the fight going. I don't see it going the distance. I think they both hit too hard and get hit too much for it to last 12 3-minute rounds. But I do see it going quite deep into the fight. So you'll get, I was going to say value for your money, but that's if you're a BT subscriber. There's no extra charge, of course, as the fight was removed from pay-per-view, which is great for the fans, obviously. Not just licking anyone's arse by saying that, but it's a fight that I was happy to pay for at the normal pay-per-view price before the announcement was made. So can't complain now that it's on regular BT subscription television. So yeah, I see it going deep into the fight, and then it's all about who imposes their game plan on the other, and also who's taken enough out of their opponent within the early stages. Although I don't see it ending early, I can see those first 6 rounds being pivotal to the eventual outcome of the contest. So if Dubois is able to exert enough damage onto Joyce, if he's able to bust him up facially, if he's able to hurt him to the body, if Joyce feels after 6 rounds that he's been in a fight, then that usual Joe Joyce stamina and volume punching and energy going into those later rounds might not be so apparent. But on the flip side of that, if Joyce has lost the large portion of those first 6 rounds, but is able to wear Dubois down, and I think it's crucial, a couple of things with Joyce. A, that he targets the body to slow Dubois down and take something out of him in the early rounds, but B, that he cuts the ring off really well. That he doesn't have to throw 100 punches around. He doesn't have to do his usual kind of just throw, not necessarily always with craft or guile. But what he does need to do is make sure he maintains pressure with his feet. He might not have the fastest feet, but he's a decent mover and he knows how to cut a ring off. He knows how to use angles to corner his opponent and to maneuver him into position to be hit by his shots. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Jeremiah Milton, the unbeaten American who sparred both, who said, yeah, Joyce might not be particularly fast, but when you get in a ring with him, that ring gets small very, very quickly because Joe knows how to cut the ring off. He's very experienced as an amateur Olympic silver medalist, of course, and has fought a better opposition as a pro. I think that experience, the ability to rough Dubois up, the ability to know when to hold and when to work, and the size as well. He's very tall, very long. He can tie Dubois up when he needs to. He can cut the space down with his footwork. And I think that could prove pivotal if he does enough of that in the early rounds, that Dubois is not only a little bit beaten up by the second half of the fight, or at least tiring, but also maybe mentally kind of challenged, a little bit dispirited, not, having to go to plan B potentially, because, for all they say about being ready for 12 hard rounds, sometimes fighters, particularly big punchers, do kind of have a feeling in the back of their mind, as much as they try to repel it, that no one can really stand up to that power and that the fights won't go too long. So if you're a huge puncher like Dubois is, and most of your opponents have fallen early, except for Kevin Johnson, who, as we said, wasn't particularly ambitious that night, as he, he's quite erratic in his performances these days. You get to the later half of the fight, your opponent's still standing, you might have exerted plenty of damage, but he's still there, still throwing, and you might start to find doubt creeping in, especially Dubois, who's a young fighter, hasn't overcome adversity, didn't compete much as a senior amateur. So all that side of things, the mental side, I think is as much a test for Dubois in this fight as physically. And that's one of the things that makes it so intriguing. But then on the Joyce side, this is his last chance. And it sounds ridiculous considering it's so early in his pro career. But he's 35 years old. If he can't get past Dubois is a formidable opponent, but he's not Anthony Joshua. He's not Tyson Fury. Let's get it right. He might become that in a few years, but at the moment, if Joe's going to beat him, he's going to beat him now. If this fight were to take place after another 2-3 years of seasoning and Joe getting older and Dubois maturing, Dubois would be an even bigger favourite than he is. And I think Dubois is too big a favourite with the bookies, by the way. But he'd be an even bigger favourite than he is now. I think, as it stands, Joyce needs to get past Dubois if he's got any hope of fulfilling the potential that's suggested by his amateur achievements. Dubois, if he loses, he's still young, he's 23, 24. If he loses, he can easily come back, he can be rebuilt, he's got the tools, he's got the promoter behind him, Frank Warren, who clearly believes in him, clearly really, really rates him. And he's growing as an attraction, as a personality. So if he did lose to Joyce, and I'm not saying he will, it's by no means the end for Dubois. Whereas for Joyce, this kind of is make or break, and that could give him the extra motivation he needs to produce the performance of his career. One thing that concerns me about Joyce is the erratic nature of his training camp for this fight. I read Chris McKenna's excellent piece about Ismail Salas in the Daily Star recently, or online, obviously, because no one's allowed out at the moment. Chris McKenna, you should read his stuff, he's very good. But on this occasion, he spoke to, he didn't speak to Ismail Salas, he documented the fact that Ismail Salas had to go back to Las Vegas during Joyce's training camp because he's got a couple of other fighters there who he's working with. Felix Verdeo is one of them. And so he started Joyce's camp with him, went back to Vegas for a few weeks, and then returned for fight week, leaving Steve Broughton, who's worked with Joyce in the past and worked with him for the most recent fight against Michael Wallish, whatever his name is. I've just realised, I think I said Bryant Jennings was his last fight earlier in this video, so that's wrong. It was Wallish, of course. I tend to forget that fight as it was a tune-up. But getting back to the point, Steve Broughton has worked with Joyce before. He'd be working with him alongside Salas anyway, and he stepped in as the head trainer while Salas was back in the US dealing with his other fighters. But that does worry me a bit because Joyce has always talked about how great Coach Salas is, how great their bond is, how much he's learned from the Cuban. And the fact that he disappeared is a bit harsh. He obviously had prior commitments, but the fact that he wasn't with Joyce for those couple of weeks, a crucial stage, I'd say, of his training camp. That's when you get towards the end of your sparring, it's when you're peaking in the gym. And Salas wasn't there to kind of point out any mistakes, to hone Joyce's form. That concerns me a little bit, and that's no disrespect to Broughton. But, especially if Salas is going to be the main man on fight night, giving instructions in the corner. Now, I'm not sure if that's the case or not, we shall see. But it's a concern either way, because even if it's Broughton, then Salas is the main man. He's the one Joe has listened to in the past. He's worked with him since the start of his pro career, on and off. So that is a bit of a worry. You know, Dubois has been beavering away in a new Peacock gym, excellent facilities there, under Martin Bowers as the head coach, as he has been throughout Dubois' embryonic pro career. So there's been no unsettling. You know, when Dubois has not been with Bowers, he's been with his dad and various other people doing strength and conditioning for the first time ever. He's done S&C, and you can tell in his physique, you know, he looks like a monster. Fights aren't won on kind of who looks better aesthetically, obviously, but it just shows how seriously Dubois and his team are taking this fight. There might be people out there, pundits and so on, who are overlooking Joyce, but I don't think Dubois and his team have. And I think that's incredibly important too. So it's time to put my neck on the line, I guess. And I don't normally do predictions, but it is the biggest British fight of the year. I feel like I should. And I feel also, I guess most importantly, I've been pressing people all week to give their predictions for the channel and kind of forcing them off the fence in some cases. So if I'm going to say that, then I have to stick my own head above the parapet as well. And I feel it'll be a very competitive fight, particularly early on. But I don't see Joyce doing sufficient damage to Dubois as Dubois does to him. I don't see him doing as much damage to Dubois as Dubois does to him early on. And I think that will prove pivotal as the fight moves into the latter stages. And I think Dubois, I think it could become quite hard to watch towards kind of round 7, 8, 9 as Dubois really takes over and Joyce gets gradually beaten up. And I see either a stoppage or the corner withdrawing Joyce somewhere around 9th or 10th round. That's my official prediction. And I can only apologise in advance to Joe Joyce and Sam Jones if I'm wrong about that. But you've got to pick someone. You know, you're going to upset someone. And we can all be wrong. It is a genuine, for me, it is a genuine 50-50 fight. Be great to hear your predictions below. I'm sure a lot of you have already commented on some of the other videos of what you think is going to happen. But still, I'd like to know what you think of my analysis. But more importantly, who you think is going to win, how, and in what round, or obviously if it goes to points. Let me know. I'll be back with FLEXpectations. I don't think I even said this was FLEXpectations, but I'll be back with the next FLEXpectations next week, Thursday. Where we'll look ahead to a couple of shows. Billy Joe Saunders against Martin Murray, headlining a Matchroom show here. And then we've also got the Frank Warren show with Anthony Yard against Lyndon Arthur on the Saturday night. And if that's not enough, we've got the hugely intriguing Errol Spence against Danny Garcia on the same night in the US. So I'll be looking ahead to all of those on FLEXpectations next week, 4:30 PM Thursday. And to reflect on Dubois Joyce, I'll be here with Reflections Monday at 4:30 PM. Appreciate your time as always, and I will see you all soon. Cheers.